All right, solar panels. I want to talk about this a bit because even though I make an alternator controller, solar panels is a really, really viable technology these days to apply to boats. I mentioned that we have got on Viking Star 2, we got 480 watts worth of solar panels. I'm not one of those guys that's going to go out every day and 4 times a day and adjust the panels to point them to the sun. I'm not the guy that's going to worry about the optimal angle or the fact that I've got shadowing coming over from my derrick boom. I just don't worry about it. I got them mounted flat, and I got them up to a controller, and guess what? They provide probably 80% of our electrical usage from about May through July. Curiously enough, May is often my highest energy producing time. Can anybody guess why that might be? There's 2 reasons. Yes, ma'am.
They're cooler.
That is absolutely one. Did anybody hear what she said? They're cooler. Solar panels are more efficient when they're cooler. That's absolutely correct. What's the other one?
Same position of the sun in the northern hemisphere.
It's related to the sun, but it's not the position. In June, there tends to be more moisture in the atmosphere. So it gets, May, you get these, look how blue that sky is. You get these beautiful crisp days. Actually, curiously enough, during the summer months, we actually can generate more power here in the Pacific Northwest than Florida, largely because of the humidity in the air. And that's not just my opinion. The government has published studies and blah, 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 blah. You can go and look it up if you want to. So anyway, solar is wonderful. The one thing, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but these energy tax credits for your houses to put solar panels on, guess what? If you have a bed and a head and a galley, you can apply those same tax credits to a vessel. Don't take tax advice from me, but go and research it. And it's not an extension, it's written into the tax credit laws. It says RVs, marine, secondary homes, your customers can get a significant amount of money back for everything needed to turn sunlight into hair dryers. Solar panels, charge controllers, batteries, inverters, wires, nuts, screws, bolts. The state of Washington, when I did mine, forgave all the sales tax. I'd take my little form to Ace Hardware because that's where I stored all my little components. I'd go to Ace Hardware and get that little nuts I needed. I'm not sure how much they like me, but I call myself aggressively frugal. My kids have other words that they would use, but if I could save $1.29 on sales tax, by God, I was going to make that paper there, right? So don't overlook this. Research it. I did mine several years ago. They changed slightly how much you can deduct and also make sure you meet the criteria. But don't overlook this because this is going to be if you've got a 6-figure install and you throw a few solar panels up, that's some real money. What else? Classic things about solar panels, shading. That's the classic thing. There are 2 problems with solar panels on a boat. One of them is shading. The boat turns, the mast, the sailboat especially, or in my case with the trawler, the mast or an antenna, you get partial shading over the solar panels and you lose output. Consider using multiple micro charge controllers rather than one big giant one, because if you've got them all in series and this guy is restricting the output, it affects how the rest of them. Whereas if you use multiple independent ones, this guy can be running full out and this guy's maybe running 30%, down 30%. The second thing, that affects solar panels is seagulls. So people are going to have to go out and clean that glass once a week because turns out that wherever you have boats or you have boats at anchor, there tends to be a lot of birds flying around for some funny reason. There are other details that I'm not an expert on, but hopefully you will cover. There are requirements around grounding of the solar panels, and they're different in the marine world. So the physical, just like an inverter, you have to run safety ground wire. Same with solar panels, you have to take that into consideration. So make sure you research and understand what that requirement is. And the last thing I will say is 48 volts is actually tough. Most solar controllers require that the input voltage on the solar panel is higher than the battery voltage. So that means if you're going to charge a 48 volt battery, which we'll get to 50, 55 volts, you have to have like 90 or 100 volts out of your solar panel. Remember that magic line I told you about, 70 volts? We just crossed it. So there's two difficulties of getting to those higher voltages. One is you have to connect multiple panels in series. So that comes back to the little microinverter stuff. And the other difficulty is you're at higher voltage and additional safety requirements. There is no easy answer to this today. So that's one of the unsolved aspects of 48 volt installs. And by the way, in the RV world as well, I sit on a lot of standard committees. We're discussing this because we want to make sure that there are safety standards and best practices out there, and we haven't come to a conclusion yet. So that's just one last comment on 48 volt systems. Any questions on solar? Yes, sir.
On that specific
Yeah.
Is there a way to configure a solar array and one or more controllers and then go to a DC to DC converter?
There are a couple of solutions, and we're not focusing on these, but like one solution, I mentioned this product called the Wakespeed 3000. It is a bidirectional converter. So what we would do in this particular case is we'd have people connect their solar panels down to a 12 volt battery, and then we'd have that converter pull energy off the 12 volt and up to the 40 volt side. That's how we solve that particular issue. There are a very small number of, the requirement of having your panel voltage higher than your battery voltage has to do with how that converter is made. And it's called a buck converter. You are bucking a higher voltage down. 95% of all solar controllers out there are buck converters. There are a small number, and you can research them, but they're kind of in the weeds, a boost converter, where you can take a lower panel voltage in and supply a higher voltage out. There's even a less common buck boost. These are electrical design characteristics. When we design a switching mode power supply, which these all are, we either make a buck converter, we make a boost converter, or we make a buck boost. They are physically different. They're very related in how they work, but how the FETs and components are placed. And if you make a buck boost, you double some of the components, so the cost goes higher. So the answer to your question is there are solutions out there, and but there's no ready way for me to say, look, here's how you solve it. I think it'll be solved in a few years, but not today. Okay. Any other questions on solar? All right.